Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the East Mediterranean, Doing Business in the East Mediterranean Oil and Gas series of webinars hosted by EMC. My name is Ashutosh Shastri, and I'm your moderator for this session. And I'm really excited that we are having a very strong star cast of practitioners in the oil and gas sector in the Southern Mediterranean region, in particular the Cyprus area. And unlike while most of the focus usually on East Mediterranean oil and gas so far has been dominated by the geopolitics and the aspects of the investments, today's session is slightly different, and it is in line with the continuation of the Doing Business series, where we are actually now focusing a little bit more on beyond the geopolitics. What are the business operations, and what does it take to be able to successfully have a social license to operate in the East Mediterranean region? And to consider some of these aspects, we have today 4 speakers, and I shall be introducing them as they come along individually. They will be speaking about safety. They will be speaking about the aspects of business registration and actually how to do business in the region. They will be speaking about the role of standardization, and they will also be speaking about the role of risk management. So this is all about operations, risk management, and actually doing the practicalities of doing business in the East Mediterranean. And I have great pleasure in introducing our first speaker of the day today, Mr. Luciano Scataglini. Mr. Scataglini is the global advisor of safety for the ENI Group. He has had a stellar career in the safety of oil and gas systems, and has a global experience through ENI, and ENI being a global company has experience of working in different parts of the world. He is going to talk to us today about the role of the offshore directive and the entire aspects of safety. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Luciano Scataglini as our first speaker of the day today. Mr. Scataglini, I would love for you to start to your remarks, please. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a brief presentation. Okay. I will speak about the application of the European Offshore Safety Directive in Cyprus. ENI Cyprus has operated in Cyprus since 2013 in an offshore deep water environment. Within the context of the compliance with the HSE legislation that had been enforced after Macondo blowout in 2010, the Republic of Cyprus issued the regulations number 424/2015 and 215/2018. And on the basis of this regulation, ENI Cyprus has prepared and submitted the required documents, namely the well notification report and the report on major hazards. Before the transposition of the European directive into the Cypriot regulations, ENI Cyprus adhered to a joint industry project sponsored by the Cyprus University of Technology, aimed at supporting the development of application guidelines. This JIP started in June 2013, and the contribution of ENI Cyprus was focused on development of a methodology today successfully applied in Italy, for example, for the preparation of the report on major hazards, which includes a structured approach to evaluate the environmental risk and define its tolerability. In practice, 4 years after the introduction of the new legislation, even thanks to the preparatory work carried out in the framework of the JIP, the process of licensing in Cyprus is positive. The application guidelines provided to operators reflect the methodologies applied, and consequently, the feedback on the evaluation of the documentation is provided in a timely manner and within the agreed time frame, which is comparable with the similar process in the other Mediterranean countries. The liaison between the competent authority, namely the Department of Labor Inspection, the other technical committees dealing with environmental impact assessment and offshore safety regulations protocols, and the authorities for licensing and external emergency response plan has been successful to date. So any efforts have been directed towards the demonstration that the offshore safety regime in the Mediterranean is robust enough to be comparable with the North Sea one. An harmonized approach in the whole Mediterranean where ENI operates, including Italy, Montenegro, and Cyprus. The adoption of a similar approach in the whole basin, as far as risk assessment and above all emergency management are concerned. The promotion of consistent standards for drilling operations and relevant barriers identification and performance standards. The promotion of a common framework for financial capabilities in case of major accidents. So the most notable features of this methodology are a detailed description of sensitive environment, and this is, of course, in the link to the environmental impact assessment. The workforce and contractor engagement at the early stage of the analysis, for example, the ASIC and the risk assessment, preliminary risk assessment. The utilization of independent verifiers who are already familiar with the directive. A structured identification of safety and environmentally critical elements and the relevant performance standards. A structured emergency response plan consisting in 3 tiers where the involvement of ENI from the subsidiary up to the corporate is gradually enforced. The identification of financial limits against oil spills, which are aligned with the North Sea standard figures, and then modulated according to the estimated volumes and paths of the oil spill, crude oil or diesel fuel spill. The overall methodology is divided into the following steps. Step number 2 is the preparation of the well operation notification, which includes well data, information about critical parameters, like the weather limits for well-related operations, the well program, the well stability and control provisions, and the well barriers. The site description in terms of environmental sensitivity, like the presence of special birth areas, fisheries restricted areas, artificial reefs areas, sites of community importance, and so on. Calculation of the frequency of the major hazards, including the probability of failure of existing barriers, which take into account the structural failures, the geological factors in case of blowout, and the human factor. Evaluation of the top events consequences in terms of fire explosions and pollution. As far as pollution is concerned, the severity is calculated on the basis of the receptor sensitivity, where the receptor is threefold: protected areas, socioeconomic and cultural areas, coast and coastal habitats. The severity evaluation takes into account the volume spilled, the duration of the impact until a recovery plan has been able to restore the quality of the polluted area, the transboundary effects, if any, and the scale of the impact. All these elements concur to the estimate of the risk significance in terms of number of receptors affected and the relevant extent of damage. Finally, there is the definition of the risk acceptability by means of a matrix frequency versus severity, which is internationally recognized and already applied to all Mediterranean countries, so that we have same approach, same language, easier confrontation. The final step is the emergency preparedness via a tiered emergency response plan where, according to the emergency severity, the person in charge escalates from the subsidiary to the E&I corporate organization that can activate resources from other business and geographic areas. So the quick wins for a full field development are the single point of reference for submission and approval of documents, alignment of documents submitted for single authorization, then the independent verification, the standardization supported by the company headquarter technical authorities, the identification of the performance KPI, and a collaboration among the member state competent authorities in the area of the. Okay, thank you very much. So now I am available for any questions that can arise.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Scataglini. There is one particular question which we will be having question and answers at the towards the end of the conversation when all the presentations come together. But yeah. The first the question that strikes me first is when it comes to the development of the KPIs that you spoke about, which are at the asset level, to what extent does and I know you mentioned the involvement of E&I corporate and how the whole system fits together. To what extent is the development of the KPIs informed by E&I's experience in other parts of the world or other experiences in other fields? If you could just quickly elaborate on that, and then what we will do is we will go through some other questions that people may have as well.
In terms of KPI, so I I can mention the analysis of accidents, for example, the worldwide perspective, so that we can take the advantage to have this kind of KPIs, for example, for process data. So we have a data bank where all the spills, all the events are collected and divided into different tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, according to the international standards and the IOGP also, guidelines. And according to that, we can modulate our risk assessment. We can consider them in the risk assessment. And we can, of course, take advantage of this data to perform the analysis. Other data are related, for example, the performance of the safety and environmentally critical elements. That for sure they have a priority one importance in the maintenance testing programs, so that we can act directly on this type of barriers in order to guarantee that they are working when requested.
Thank you. There's one more question which also, I saw in one of your slides, it started with the 2010 Macondo episode, and then you speak about the 2013 European Offshore Safety Directive.
Yeah.
Was the Offshore Safety Directive actually a direct response to Macondo, or was it something that was already going on at a particular point in time? And to that extent, how do you see the Offshore Safety Directive not only being applied in the region, but can it actually make any substantial contribution to the sustainability or the operations of the business in the East Mediterranean? So those are the two kind of questions relating to the directive that I
okay. The first question I understand is if at the time of Macondo, if we were already organized our activities in order to prevent an event like this, and I can answer yes, because our well operations adopted the most advanced standards, and also in terms of barriers, we have a very efficient research and development department specifically for well operation that has developed some tools that can support the main barriers in producing a better isolation of the reservoir from the surface. So we analyzed in detail the event of Macondo, and we excluded that an event like this would happen in our operation. And so even for example, it's very interesting to note that the financial capabilities, that is one of the topics that is quite important. We were already prepared for this because we have a very high level, high amount for coverage of major accidents that include also the major accidents. So we were ready in all areas where we operate. We can intervene with a massive financial capability.
Okay.
In terms of the contribution that the directive has given to the development of the business, I can say that yes, the contribution was quite high. The application had a clear opportunity to develop a structured approach to major assets. Our objective has been to create the same framework in all areas where we operate within the Mediterranean basin.
Right.
So we contribute to create an oil and gas province in the Mediterranean Sea, so including not only the European side of the Mediterranean, but also the opposite side. That we have developed a very important project like Zola, for example.
Yes.
And in order to share the same practice with all the host countries. So not only the risk assessment methodology, but also the identification and maintenance of critical elements, the emergency plan, very important. Face major events like a blowout. We have a plan that is unique in all the basins. Even if our target were to expand our business to other Mediterranean countries, we can export a model that is well consolidated and tuned up. There is also another benefit deriving from an approach like this. The opportunity, for example, for the competent authorities of some emerging oil and gas countries to share with more mature realities a common language and the assurance that any concession is given to a company with a recognized expertise in these matters, and above all, enough financial capability to face the consequences of natural. So all these aspects, in my opinion, can be a good framework in which we can operate with the same language and the same contribution, so that also the authorities can rely in a quite consolidated framework that has been already used in other countries.
Mr. Scataglini, there is a question that has come up in the chat, the box that I see. It is from Mr. Socrates Nicola. If an accident happens, it is a question from a Cypriot perspective. If an accident happens, do we as the sovereign Republic of Cyprus have the means to stand against the pollution? If not, can ENI help on this? Now, I don't know what the ENI help in such a situation might be, but what I would like you to perhaps inform us is your understanding of how the Republic of Cyprus government has kind of adapted this whole European offshore directive for its preparedness. A commentary on that, if possible, and a possible, let's hope it never comes to it, a possible role of a company, international company like ENI, as to what is it that it can do to help in such a situation. I guess that is kind of following from your comments about the study that you did about Macondo in ENI to kind of do the preparation. So it probably is a continuation of that, but in the context.
Yes, exactly. So the approach is like this. So we have a major accident like a blowout, for example, with oil. So okay, in Cyprus we manage gas, but we can have oil. If we have oil, a blowout of oil. So of course the pollution event will be important. But in that case, we have an organization that can can call on scene the whole organization of ENI. That means not just the upstream sector, but also the downstream with the capabilities they have in terms of means for collecting oil, for example, dispersants or booms like this. And also ships, for example, collect the oil. This is important. So the ships are coming from the downstream sector. But when we involve, we call the corporate organization in case of major accident, all these business units can help in facing that. Then we have also some agreements with some external companies, specialized companies. For example, OSRL, for example, in Southampton. We have also some contract with the companies in the States that can intervene in a very short time with expertise and also tools like, for example, the capping. And so there's a lot of agreements, a lot of means. So the winning approach is that we can mobilize the whole organization in any country we operate in order to sum up all the competencies, the resources that all our business have.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other question? Let me just check. There's perhaps one more question coming up. Yes, there was a question from Mr. Mukesh Maheshwari, and I think you did answer that question as well. Saying, is there any capping device arrangement in the region? And you have answered that question already.
Yes, so we have for sure a capping device that is owned by located in Italy. But of course, we have some agreements, as I said, to mobilize some capping device from other organizations.
Okay. So I have a couple of other questions, but at the same time, I am a little bit conscious that we use the super efficient presentation and start that you've given us to kind of keep that 5-minute time reserve with us. And so I will probably resist from asking one or two more questions, which I do want to ask later on, but I will probably want to ask them as part of a broader discussion towards the end.
Yes. Sure.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Scatagliani, for your presentation. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is the Vice President of the Italy-Cyprus Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Kostas Katsouras. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Please excuse me. But you are a partner in a law firm, and you bring not only the perspective of a lawyer working in the region, but also you're wearing your hat as a Vice President of the Italy-Cyprus Chamber of Commerce. And you're going to talk to us a little bit more about the practicalities of doing business in the region. So the floor is yours, Kostas.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everybody, and thank you for sharing your time with us today. I would like also to thank the President of the Chamber, Giuseppe Marino, and the Vice President, Federico Francina, who are amongst the participants of this event right now, for the kind invitation to present some words about the topic here today. I would like to share my screen so that you have the chance to follow a bit of the presentation. Let me know if you can see the presentation right now or not. Just
you can see it. It's all done. It's there.
Yeah, just to make it in a full screen version. A few words for the Italian Cypriot Chamber of Commerce. It has been recently recognized at the governmental level from the Italian government as a Chamber of Commerce. It's recorded in the register of the Italian Foreign Chambers held by Union Camere, and it aims to contribute to the development of economic, commercial, technical, legal, scientific and cultural cooperation between Italy and Cyprus. There is a very close collaboration between the chamber and the two embassies of the two countries. We have to say that the ambassadors of Italy in Cyprus and Cyprus in Italy are honorary presidents of the chamber. So there is a very close cooperation at the governmental level with the embassies of the two countries. So the role of the chamber is exactly to encourage the creation of a climate of trust and collaboration between the institutions and the companies of both Italy and Cyprus. Just to give an overview of the presentation, I will, since we have a short period of time and we have to try to stick on time, I'm sharing a lot of information with the organizers so that it's available for anybody if wants more info, but I will try to focus in some major points for doing business in Cyprus and make also a reference to the industry's development, focusing on oil and gas. First of all, let me say that Cyprus is a member of the European Union since 2004 and member of Eurozone since 2008. It's one of the safest jurisdictions and more tax-friendly jurisdictions within EU. It follows the common law system in legal framework. It has the common law legal framework in doing business in the companies and contracts law, but also uses the administrative law of European Union. So it's a bit of a mixed system of doing business in terms of legal framework. However, it's one of the most friendly jurisdictions within EU, fully monitored by European Central Bank with regards to its banking sector, and applying all the laws and regulations of EU with regards to issues of health and safety, as mentioned in the previous presentations, and others with regards to the industry of oil and gas. There is a very solid business environment. Cyprus is a very famous jurisdiction for doing business because of its favorable regime, both in regards to tax and efficiency on doing business. With regards to the tax framework, I will put an emphasis in a specific recent rule which affects the industry. It's not, of course, only referring to the industry, but it's designed for the industry, mainly for the business people of the oil and gas sector. So it's the so-called 60-day rule. As of 1st of January 2017, the new 60-day rule, as it is called, can be applied. It offers individuals the option to become tax residents of Cyprus after spending only 60 days in the island. This rule comes as an amendment to the initial 183 days rule, and it provides an incentive to the individuals who are seeking to change their tax residency to Cyprus, at the same time continuing living in a different jurisdiction for the majority of the year. Just to explain here, what is this about? It is satisfactory in order to be eligible for this scheme if somebody does not reside in any other single state for a period exceeding 183 days in aggregate, if they are not considered tax residents by any other country, and if they reside in Cyprus for at least 60 days and have other defined Cyprus ties according to the set criteria. This means that this rule is applicable when all these parameters apply the one in addition to the other. So to satisfy the last criteria, an individual must carry out any business in Cyprus or must be employed in Cyprus or hold an office as a director of a company which is a tax resident in Cyprus at any time in the tax year, provided that such is not terminated during the tax year. So the individual must also maintain in the tax year a permanent residency property in Cyprus, either owned or rented by the individual. This rule focuses on attracting talented individuals on the oil and industry sector, because as we know, there are a lot of individuals in the industry that travel across the globe for projects related to the oil and industry. So it provides a favorable tax regime for all the professionals in the area. I will not mention other general parameters of doing business in Cyprus or certain criteria in specific sectors like shipping sector, real estate sector that are closely related to the oil and gas industry and any other industry when somebody decides to set up and locate to Cyprus for doing business. However, I will have to say that Cyprus offers some of the most flexible and favorable conditions for doing business. The corporate tax is at 12.5%, one of the lowest amongst the European Union, one of the lowest rates, and the general tax framework and legal framework is steady and not changing throughout the years. I think that provides a lot of safety for doing business here. Now, referring to the specifically to the energy sector and going directly to the topic of the oil and gas industry, I have to say that it's a very rapidly developing and transforming sector with a focus to the natural gas discoveries of the recent years. Cyprus is considered one of the major opportunities and attracts a lot of attention from foreign investors following the recent discoveries of hydrocarbons in the area within the island's exclusive economic zone and also in the neighborhood. We had the massive discoveries of Zohr in the Egypt's exclusive economic zone, Leviathan in Israeli economic zone. So there is a lot of interest in the area, one of the most promising areas globally with regards to natural resources. Cyprus has a strategic position in the area. It's in the crossroad of three continents: Africa, Asia, Middle East, and Southeastern Europe. Being close to Suez Canal and actually the southeast spot of EU makes Cyprus an ideal destination and an important fuel hub. Along with the favorable regime that I mentioned, it is obvious that Cyprus offers the proper infrastructure and the ecosystem, legal ecosystem and financial ecosystem for companies that want to use Cyprus as a hub for operating not only in the Cyprus exclusive economic zone or Cyprus, which is a small island, but in the whole area of the Middle East. with the opportunity, let me just stress that during a delegation trip in India on 2017, we have been informed, it was an official trip of the President of the Republic, we have been informed by the Chamber of Commerce in India that Cyprus is the 8th largest investor in India, was at the time, through holding companies, holding tax Cypriot companies. Now we are not talking about only tax structures, we are talking about the potential of creating an actual presence establishment in Cyprus in order to be able to control business in all the area. Cyprus is seen as an energy interconnection hub of the electricity grids between Eastern Mediterranean, North Africa, and Europe. There are projects as Euro-Asia Interconnector, other projects that are taking place. Very recently, we had the announcement of a forum where Egypt, Cyprus, Greece, Italy participate for the pipelines and the ecosystem of distribution of natural resources in the area. And we have many multinational oil and gas industry companies implicated in the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus. ENI is, of course, at the front of the scene. So there is increased interest in the island and in the area. A lot of licenses have been granted so far, starting with block number 12, Aphrodite, which was the first one to be researched and the first one to be declared commercial some years ago. Starting with Noble Energy, which then sold the rights for exploitation and commercial development to Royal Dutch Shell and two Israeli companies, Delek and Anver. And I have to say that the Cypriot government is constantly conducting discussions and negotiations with regards to the infrastructure required for landing the gas in Cyprus, for also creating pipeline to European Union through Cyprus, exploring all alternatives, LNG. There was a tender that for the construction of the LNG that was given to a Chinese consortium. Recently, we had the tender for the advisory project related to the audit of this LNG project. There are many developments that are taking place as we speak. The major legal framework for doing business in Cyprus in the hydrocarbon exploration and exploitation activities is governed by the hydrocarbon law of 2007 and the hydrocarbon regulations of 2007 and 2009. And it applies to the territorial waters of Cyprus, the continental shelf, and the Cyprus Economic Exclusive Zone. Activities are subject to general Cypriot laws and regulations, and for oil and gas activities, the European Union Directive on the conditions of granting and using authorizations for the prospection, exploration, and production of hydrocarbon and other relevant EU legislation is applicable. I have to say that Cyprus has ratified the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention Law of the Sea. Unfortunately, as we know, Turkey has not ratified this convention. It is the only state that has not ratified this. Based on this international law framework, Cyprus has agreed and signed with Egypt based on the median line principle, the exclusive economic zone. There is also an agreement with Lebanon, which has not yet been ratified by the Parliament of Lebanon. There is also the exclusive economic zone agreement with Israel. So everything in the area except, I would say, the Turkish Cypriot part in the north of the island has been settled, and this remains to be a question mark. As we all know, there are massive discussions at an EU level, at an international level, in an effort of reaching an agreement, if possible, between all the stakeholders in the area, mainly Greece and Turkey, Cyprus, and also the other parts in the area like Egypt and so on. There is not any specific other law for oil and industry related to doing business in the sector other than the ones that I mentioned. Of course, there are many law applicables. We had, for example, the presentation on the health and safety issues in the previous presentation. There are all the laws applicable for doing business in Cyprus are also applicable with regards to oil and gas industry. I have to say that for tax purposes, it's important to clarify that exclusive economic zone of Cyprus is considered a part of the Cyprus territory. So all applicable laws for the Cypriot territory apply also to the exclusive economic zone. That includes VAT and any other tax legislation. I have to say, in the context of closing this short lecture, that we all are aware of the impact of the corona crisis in the sector. We have reporting losses, for example, of ExxonMobil for the first time in the last 30 years. We are seeing how the sector is shaking and the turbulence that has been created, as in all sectors, as it definitely has an impact on demand. However, we have to say that we see no change of plans with regards to the activities in the Eastern Mediterranean, and this is due to the fact that the area is one of the most promising worldwide with regards to the existence of natural resources and the expectation for their commercial development and the outcome with regards to net profit from the related activities. So even if the delays are expected due to the pandemic scheduling of all the major players, Cyprus is not expected to be affected at least on a long-term basis, and it may capitalize to the major benefits and potential from the future developments in the sector, which are obvious, and we are all expecting next decade to bring, affecting also other sectors of the economy, taking advantage of oil and gas sectors on the favor of all the other sectors also. Thank you very much for your attention, and available for anything to clarify on the subject.
Yes, thank you very much, Kostas, for your presentation. The most important takeaway I took away from this is that Kostas, that Cyprus is now becoming a hub for the oil and gas activities in the region. And from a business location perspective, it offers certain advantages. The question I have is, there is a very strong Italian oil field services industry that is vibrant and operating in Italy. And to that extent, given that this is largely a question on oil, a seminar on oil and gas and on the region, it would be very helpful to know what sort of interest or actual presence on the ground do we already see in Cyprus in this area from Italy, particularly because you represent the Italian chamber? And the wider question is that, where oil and gas assets and regions have thrived, they have always created some sort of a nerve center. In the US, it is Houston. In the North Sea, it is Aberdeen. And if the resource, as we are beginning to see in the region, is so huge, do you see that sort of a center of excellence kind of setting itself up in Cyprus? And is the government of Cyprus kind of making any, overt moves to actually kind of, push and start to create of that ecosystem? I mean, the tax regime and everything is a supporting support for all of that. But is there a explicit strategy that the government of Cyprus has to kind of, become a center of excellence in the region? That would be a very useful question to answer.
Thank you for your question. Starting from the first one, I would say that definitely the presence of ENI here in Cyprus in the exploitation round and the fact that such a big Italian company has already a presence in Cyprus creates the safety net, if I may say. And as we all know, when such a large company goes in a country, there are satellite companies related to the distribution, to the construction, to the advisory services related to the activities of such a major player. So yes, the answer is definitely positive. We see a lot of interest from Italian companies to get connected in Cyprus in the sector, not only in the oil and gas sector, but in general in the energy sector and in other sectors. So we have interest for public tenders, we have interest for operational activities related to the sector, and we are expecting this interest to increase during the coming years. And this also is one of the major purposes of the establishment of the chamber, to facilitate Italian companies in order to locate in Cyprus and to be able to do business from Cyprus, having the support of an organization such as the chamber, which will facilitate every step that must be taken in order for these activities and operations to take place smoothly, and to create the result of enhancing the relationship between the companies within the two countries. So yes, definitely the answer is positive, and I'm mentioning the reasoning for that, the existence of one of the major companies of Italy and the interest for satellite industries related to the activities of this company and of the sector in general. Now, with regards to your question, whether there is an effort to create an ecosystem other than only the tax regime in Cyprus, definitely I have to say that the two matters are interrelated. For example, with the new tax rules in European level, in order to have a tax residency in a country, you have to have management and control in a country. So definitely you have to have establishment managing your business in this country. So in order to be able to take advantage of the friendly and the favorable tax regime in Cyprus, a company has to be here in Cyprus and operate managing their activities in Cyprus and in the whole area from Cyprus. On that context, we see that mainly Limassol, which is the major port of Cyprus, and closer to the southern part of where the exclusive economic zone plots have been assigned to companies is, is transforming into a, let's say, center for the sector, and this relates to the real estate infrastructure, the creation of the actual framework where companies may operate from, with the building permits, the creation of the zones, the whole facilities, the connection to the port, everything that relates to operating through the sector. Major investments have taken place. I will refer to one investment that took place from 2010 onwards by VVTV, creating one of the major terminals in the area, in a very big plot in Vasilico area in Limassol, which is constantly transforming into an energy hub in the area. So both in terms of actual infrastructure and the legal regime, there is an effort to combine all the elements needed for the puzzle to be completed and the companies to have the proper means of doing business in the sector here in Cyprus.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Two more questions regarding tax benefits, etc. One is from Mr. Mukesh Maheshwari, who says, for a Cyprus passport holder, is there any R&D benefit from the government in terms of financial aid, free land, etc.? And the other one is from Elena Kriakov, who says, in relation to the tax VAT benefits, will these apply only for businesses arriving and operating in Cyprus or for the employees, consultants as well?
I didn't hear you, the last part of your question.
Will the benefits relating to tax and VAT benefit, will they apply only for the businesses or individual employees or consultants who will be working in the region as well?
Thank you very much. Just to clarify that with relation to the passport question, Cyprus has in place one favorable scheme for acquiring the Cypriot citizenship. It requires, amongst other, either long-term presence, the so-called citizenship by investment passport scheme requires a considerable investment in Cyprus in forms that are approved by the government and with criteria that are audited by external auditors with the latest amendments of the scheme, so that the potential investors may acquire the passport following a considerable investment in the range of 2 million and higher in order to acquire the citizenship of Cyprus. We have a lot of details in our law firm's website, ekllc.eu, where somebody can find all the criteria for the eligibility for the passport citizenship scheme in Cyprus, and especially the citizenship by investment scheme in Cyprus. Now, with regards to the question related to the individuals, the example that I mentioned before, the 60-day rule, applies, for example, classically to the individuals. We are referring to persons that are 60 days in Cyprus and at least every year, and they are not tax residents in any other country with the criteria that apply to other countries. For example, if I constantly move throughout global works and certain areas, monitoring projects of my company, and I'm an individual in the sector, if I am more than 60 days in Cyprus and I do not fulfill the criteria for being a tax resident in another jurisdiction, then I can take benefit as an individual of the tax residency scheme in Cyprus for individuals. Now, for high-paid employees of more than 100,000 euros who are professionals in the sector, there are also favorable criteria, which I do not have the time to present here now, but this is also a scheme that refers to individuals.
That's fine.
Many information can be found in both the official governmental websites for tax environment in Cyprus, and also in our firms, as I mentioned, in the chambers related channels.
Great. Thank you very much. I think most of the questions that have come up in this session have been answered. Let me just quickly go through them. Which specific Italian sectors I think has been answered. Is Israel a part of UN clause? I have answered that. The presentations will be available. Yes, I think, this has been an excellent practical advice presentation. Kostas, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for covering a large swathe of information in a very concentrated way of time and very efficiently. So thank you very much for that. And I hope you are able to stay back for the late Q&A later on. If not, then if there are questions that come relating to you, then we will be happy to send them your way, and then they will probably have them answered in the usual manner.
Thank you so much, and apologies, but I have to enter into another engagement shortly. So any Q&A, we will be more than welcome to reply through the chamber, whose purpose, as I mentioned, is to facilitate doing business in the sector and in other sectors in Cyprus and Italy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So our next speaker is Mr. Andrea Montanaro from the firm Quantis, which is a risk management operating advisory consulting firm, which advises on the risk management. They have some tools relating to drilling, safety, reliability. So I think Andrea is going to talk not only about data analytics and predictive analytics that can be used for ensuring reliable operations, but also the economic risk factors that need to be considered in providing, a good operational guidance for operators in the region. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Andrea.
Thank you.
You can start sharing the presentation when you're ready. Thank you.
Yes. Morning to everyone. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, first of all, to the organizer and the chairman to give me the opportunity to speak today. My presentation will be about an innovative portfolio strategy to drive investment decision-making in the oil and gas industry. So we're gonna watch the same page on another side, so the financial one. First of all, I will give you a context in the decision-making in the oil and gas industry, and then we will run through three main parts of the economic analysis when you do business in this sector, the asset evaluation, so single asset evaluation, and then a portfolio management strategy within all the company. And then we will finish with a focus on risk escalation. First of all, I want to focus on the decision-making, which is almost bidimensional in the oil and gas industry. It is related to space and time. Space means that we have to decide where we want to invest in terms of asset that could be within a different maturity level, with different technical limits, different chance of success of exploration. Then we have affiliates, and so the previous speaker, for example, helps to run affiliates in different countries, in Cyprus in this case, with the tax position, with sales contracts and so on. And then another level, it is the portfolio level of an international company, which can do business in different countries with different affiliates, and so with different legal entities. The other decision is related to time. So if I want to, when I want to start, for example, to farm in an asset, or explore another field or decommission another asset and revamping another one. So this means decision making in a strategic way in oil and gas. And today we're going to focus on how uncertain this decision making is every time, and as a matter of fact, especially in these special times today, unfortunately. So we have a different level of risks. The asset one related to production variability, the technical part. Then we have the affiliate risks related to country risk and inflations. And then we have the portfolio risks related, for example, as you may know, the oil price fall down this year or for almost 50%. The exchange rate, or for example, the global demand and also the supply problems related to COVID-19. So there are multi-level uncertainties, and nowadays they have been consolidated in different, using different sources related to, for example, reservoir evaluation, the capex related to development and drilling. The production forecasts are evaluated in a probabilistic way, okay, already in considering uncertainties. And then we have also a contribution from different corporate functions like HSE, as the first colleague speakers today, project risk management, enterprise risk management, and finance. So all these variables related to uncertainties evaluation have to be consolidated in order to give the possibility to make an effective decision to the top management in order to invest or not in a field, in a country, or in different other investments. So first of all, asset evaluation, the first stream. What are the objectives? First of all, to integrate the detailed risk studies that I've told before, and to provide to decision makers a 360 vision of the project economics, and we will see that. Considering the full asset life cycle, well, I mean, in the oil and gas sector, an asset could last for 30, 50 years, okay? So the things really changes during this time frame. So it is important to consider to analyze the return on investment, the whole full asset life cycle. And then to give, again, to the decision maker of the final investment decision, really a detailed evaluation and the sensitivity analysis. How do we give a complete picture? How do we model a financial forecast for an asset? First of all, we have to apply and consider the interest, the inflation, the exchange rates, and commodities prices as a global inputs of the market scenarios. Then, internally speaking of the company, we evaluate CAPEX, OPEX, and ABEX, the production and the sales that could be different, the two of them, by investment phases. As you may know, we can have like a simplified schedule of exploration, development, production, and then decommissioning, okay? These in a time frame of 20 to 50 years and more. Then it's crucial to consider the fiscal model related to the country, because in each country of the world, as it is in Cyprus and in the Eastern Mediterranean countries, the fiscal model is different. So the company will have to face really different types of calculating the taxes. And this could really impact the return on investment of the overall operation. An example of a result in terms of cash flow of the valuation of an asset, you see here You can see the capex at the beginning. This is on a yearly basis. The capex expensive here. Then you have the ramp up of the production, and that is slides down here in more or less 25 years. And then you have revenues in green and OPEX in yellow. And at the end, we do not have to forget the decommissioning costs, okay, that are huge in many ways. So that could be a cash flow breakdown of an oil and gas assets from the beginning to the end with the production line here that you see. Well, starting from this, overall in the world are evaluating an asset like this. This innovative approach start to add a different level of assessment. In the last slide, I spoke about this case. So I have a financial model, a financial forecast with costs and revenues and taxes, okay, to simplify. And I calculate the net present value of my assets. So really, my income at the beginning, at the end of the operation, considering the overall operation, considering also the discounting factors and so on. But if I want to forecast in a more accurate way, I can do a what if analysis. So a worst and the best case, considering commodity prices, for example, fluctuation, exchange rates, and so on. But then I can also make a probabilistic risk assessment on multiple variables. So that could be the rates, or also the cost, the production profiles, the sales, so the demand in this situation, it's really falling. And with this probabilistic assessment, which is the innovative way, we can really depict all the range of values that could be the output of our investment. And so in this case, I analyze by its KPI related to the net present value. What could be an output of this analysis? So we are considering all the risks that are and uncertainties that are affecting the asset economics during its lifetime. Oil prices fluctuation, changes in demand as for COVID-19, and so on and so forth. Running a Monte Carlo simulation, which is a simulation that iterates thousands of times the same financial forecast, changing randomly the risks that we have evaluated before, okay? We land to a graph like this, which I want to show you how could be read. First of all, we have the baseline here at point A, which has a 10% probability to be achieved. So without considering any risk, my MPV will be like 50 million, okay? But this has only 10% probability to be reached. So there are 90% of the cases in which I have a lower MPV, okay? The point B highlights that I have 50% probability to have at least 21 million. So more or less 30 million less. This is the realistic cases, which is the median one. So you have 50% of the cases that have an MPV much higher than this one, and 50% of the cases lower. So this is called the realistic because it is not conservative nor pessimistic, nor optimistic, sorry. Then this graph shows me also that I have a 77 probability to have a positive MPV, so that my investment really makes a little profit, okay? So, but I have, on the other hand, the more or less 25% to lose money, okay, in an absolute term. And up to, I can lose money up to the point D, so minus 40 million, okay, of risk exposure. So this is an innovative way of calculating the the return on investment.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, please.
Can you talk a little bit about the P90? I don't know if everyone got that, because this particular point, you said there is a 10% chance of or 90% chance of losing money. What is that?
Yeah, okay. It's in this point C, indeed. You have this 77 probability, okay.
That's, I understood that, yeah.
Okay, to have a positive NPV, and 23%, so
Of course.
the other phase, okay, to have an NPV less than 0, so to lose money, okay. Yes. The P90 is, how can I say, a conservative point in which you have only 10% of the scenarios that could be lower than that one, okay. So if you want to be really conservative, you evaluate the investment and you consider the P90. In this case, you see that the P90 is less than 0, so you cannot go on with the investment, okay.
But that is only in the very conservative case where you have considered the most. So the most conservative case is where how you define your P90.
Yeah.
And that is where you have a chance of losing about $18 million.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
and
it's not the 90% probability of losing money. That's what yeah.
In a realistic scenario, you will gain 21 million instead of 50, which is the baseline, okay, without considering risks. So decision maker with this kind of approach obviously gains a lot of more information, okay, that could help them to make the correct decision, because it depends also on the risk perspective, not only on a single value. All the assumptions are more evident and highlighted, and the range of the output is considered instead of considering only one point, which told to the decision maker, okay, you're gonna gain 50 million, and that's it. But now he will see how could be really different the output, and the decision will be taken on this. Then, when I consolidate asset, we start to talk about portfolio management. So we have to consolidate costs and revenues, and but the tax position is related to the legal entity, so to the affiliate. So I have to consider the tax position in this level. Then I have to really report to the management about economics and risks, talking about portfolio, and support the financial planning for strategic reviews. And we want to leave the traceability of all the assumptions for an audit purposes and an accuracy of the analysis. So we talk about the asset level, which is the upper side, and now we're talking about the affiliate level with the tax position and the portfolio level. An example of an executive summary with this kind of approach without considering risk at the time is that you can highlight how much each country is contributing to the future cash flow of the company, or how much is the break-even price in terms of dollar per barrel oil equivalent, or the unit cash flow generated by each country, okay? These obviously evaluated in a time frame that could be, for example, from now to 2050, okay? Then, if I consider risks, okay, I really have different scenarios of cash flows of the overall portfolio. So if I analyze all the assets considering the risks, and I consolidate these assets and so their risks at the portfolio level, I will have, and this is an example, all my analysis risk-based, okay? And so I will have different outputs in terms of cash flow in this example, And I want to focus on that because in these uncertain times, okay, having a portfolio strategy considering risks could really be a game changer. So the last part of the presentation, it will be about focus on risk escalation. The scope is to evaluate portfolio key risk indicators, okay, and to escalate risks based not on a qualitative level, okay? We didn't see any qualitative matrix before in this presentation because we are talking about a statistical model using Monte Carlo simulation. So we are doing a quantitative risk analysis to reach the efficient frontier for the portfolio optimization. So first of all, we're speaking about KRIs, capacity observance, and targets achievement. In this case, for example, if I am a company and I want to set a capacity of, for example, $110 million of CapEx each year on a yearly basis, okay, considering risks, I can calculate, okay, the CapEx variation year by year, okay, as you see, and the level of confidence on targets achievement. As you see here, all the blue columns are in the confidence level, while below this, this threshold, this red threshold, you will have in 2020, for example, this year, that you are not capable to sustain this CapEx, considering, so you have only 30% level of confidence, okay? So in the 70% of the cases, you will be below this threshold, and then you will, so you will expend more, okay, up to $250 million, okay? Yeah. So this could be an approach to analyze the capacity of the company. Another thing is to escalate the risks at the portfolio level. So we evaluate the single assets and then consolidate to the portfolio. And so we will see how much the risks are correlated to the total portfolio NPV, so the total return on investment of the company. So here, for example, a driver could be the net production profile that could really, really impact the return on investment, the country risk, and then other technical issues. This approach gives an unequivocal risk prioritization, whatever the complexity of the portfolio. And in this case, obviously, in these times, we can obviously add the uncertainty related to oil price and related to the demand and the supply costs.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yeah,
on this slide, you see that, you know, drilling weather requirements, QA/QC, pollution, uncertainty on condensate, etc. They all relate, in a sense, to the net impact they have is on the net production profile. Yeah. So to what extent is do these numbers reflect the elimination of the causality, or are these independent variables by themselves?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for the question. Those are different risk factors that could be dependent or independent from each other. Okay. But all of them are impacting or costs or revenues or both. Okay. So they are directly impacting the NPV, so the net present value of my investment. Okay. For example, if I have drilling weather downtime, I will have more CapEx, okay? And this will impact my NPV. Yeah, yeah. If I have a country risk, I will have a much higher weighted average cost of capital, a much higher discount rate, and this will impact my NPV. My production profile will go down, okay? Obviously, this will impact my revenues and then my NPV. Or for example, my sales will go down due to a loss of demand in these times. This will impact on NPV. And obviously the fluctuation of the oil price will proportionally impact my NPV as well, okay? Oil and gas price, obviously.
Yeah. So these bar charts essentially reflect the level of priorities, the descending order of priority in which some of the risk will begin to impact the future cash flows.
That's exactly what is highlighting this graph in terms of correlation from 0 to 100%. 100% means that it's perfectly correlated. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Sorry for the interruption.
No. Absolutely. Thank you. And this approach really is a game changer. Why? Because if you see on the left side of the screen, you have the deterministic approach without considering risk. If I have 5 portfolio here, I will evaluate them on a loss and profit and loss, obviously, perspective. So my best portfolio will be the green one, and the worst will be the red one. But if I add an X, which is the level of risk, and high level on the left, low level on the right, you will see if I evaluate the risk. In this case, the green portfolio, the best one on the left side, could be a worst, okay, in the probabilistic approach because it's too risky. And if I set a threshold of risk acceptability, for example, the loss of 30 million, this is not reaching this acceptable threshold. On the other hand, I will have 2 of the middle portfolio, which will be the best in sense that one is more profitable and risky, and the second one is less profitable but has a lower level of risk. So I will be able to draw an efficient frontier of different portfolios. How are they built? These portfolios are built of decisions. For example, in a portfolio strategy, which is one of these bullets, I could decide to farm in an asset and farm out another one, okay, or revamp another. So I built different portfolio strategies and analyze them not only in a profit and loss way, but also in the risk level way. And this give us the efficient frontier, which is the best portfolio strategy for us. Okay.
Andrea, I'm sorry, just don't want to interrupt too much, but we are also slightly running against time. So if
I have only the last slide.
Yeah, perfect.
The last slide is related to an example. In this case, I have 4 portfolio, high profit on above, and on the right I have the low risk. In this case, this orange portfolio is the worst one because I have high risk and low profit. Then I have the blue one, which is high risk and good profit. But obviously, if I have to consider how these 2 strategies are more or less the same because have high profit and low risk. So I will have choose between these 2 ones. Obviously, then depends on technicalities.
Okay.
So thanks for the attention and the patience. And if you have any question, please.
Well, in the interest of time, Andrea, what I will do is I'll have your questions towards the end. Okay. What I would now like to do is to invite our final, last but not the least, most important speaker of the day on standardization from the Dutch Standardization Agency, NEN, Mr. Jarno Daghorst. Jarno, I know you've got to leave, and I know you're slightly concerned about me running a little bit slow on time. But I hope we will still have some very good participation. So the floor is yours. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you for the introduction, and give me the opportunity to present to you the exciting word of the oil and gas standardization. Now I have to see how can I share my screen.
Perfect.
Yes, I think now everyone can see my slide deck. Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, my presentation is in 2 parts. First, I will introduce to you standardization in more general terms, because not everyone may be acquainted with standardization, and then I will focus on the oil and gas standardization, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean area. First of all, why do we standardize? And I think from the previous presentation, it was already sometimes mentioned that standardization is, has some benefits. I always use this old-fashioned picture that very well explains that we would like to overcome trade barriers. It's also very important that we speak the same language, especially if you enter new areas. People may have different definitions for the same terms. Harmonization of the specifications. I think it was also mentioned in one of the previous presentations that common specifications facilitates different kind of processes. And it's also a kind of license to operate, and we'll elaborate on that in more detail later on. And nowadays, it's also very important to contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and also standards is an effective tool to contribute to achieving those goals. Then very brief about standardization. I think there are three main characteristics of standardization. First of all, it is an open multi-stakeholders process, so everyone who has an interest can participate. Secondly, it is a consensus building process, so at the end everyone can agree with the content of the standards, meaning there is no sustained opposition. So everyone has the possibility to share his or her view, and there's a good discussion about that. And at the end, there is a common sense about the final agreement to be included in the standards. And last but not least, it's also a very transparent process. First of all, it is an open process, so everyone can join, but there will also be, for example, a public consultation. So everyone has the opportunity to provide comments on a draft before it is being published. And every comment that has been submitted, there should be a justification what has been done with the comment. It can either be accepted or rejected, but if it is rejected, then at least the one who provided the comments will get a rationale why it has been rejected. And at the end, the standard is publicly available, so everyone has access to the final result. The final result is a standard. There's just a document, there's a document with agreements on products, services, and systems. So everything where people would like to have an agreement about, it can be done in the standards. It's very good to know that standards are designed for voluntary use, because sometimes people think that standards are mandatory, but in principle they are designed for voluntary use. But they can have a more binding status, for example, if it is referred to in legislation or in business-to-business communication or a trade. The purchasing order can impose you to use standards, but it's up to the user of the documents. And of course, it's very important that it address today's challenges with respect to trade, with respect to knowledge transfer, health, safety, and the environment is very important. It should also facilitate innovation. So that's why we always say that a standard should be written in a performance-based way. That explains which kind of minimum performance should be reached without prescribing how, because there might be new methods, new technologies to achieve the performance. So we should prevent that the standard prescribe a particular method that prevents new innovations and new technologies. Also in the hydrocarbon sector, there's of course strong regulations, and standards can support that legislation. I think sometimes a reference is already made to the Offshore Safety Directive in the European Union. Of course, each country has its own national legislation, also in the field of oil and gas exploration and production. And of course, any organization has to comply with legal requirements, and they have to demonstrate that they comply with those requirements as part of the compliance management. One way to do that is to demonstrate compliance is applying standards. Of course, the standards should then be linked to the law concerned. Of course, the legislator, the regulator can trust you on the blue eyes, but sometimes it's better that an independent party has assessed your organization and provides you with a certificate when you comply indeed with the standards. And then that certificate can then be shown to the regulator as a tool to prove that you comply with the legal requirements. And the benefit is that then the regulator can say, well, I trust the certificates. So that part of the legal requirements, I don't have to pay much attention because it is already very well covered. So the regulator can focus on other aspects that might not be covered with standards and certification. But also may say, well, I can reduce my surveillance by paying less inspections and so on. So that way, standardization, certification can be an effective tool with respect to legal requirements. But of course, there are more benefits to participate and to invest in standardization. Because at the end, we would like to create standards that create added value. And by your participation, you have access to a great network of peers with a lot of knowledge and expertise that can be shared. But you can also influence the content of the documents, because the content of the standard is written by experts. So if you are taking part in that writing process, then you can steer the direction of any documents. And that, of course, can be beneficial because you know the direction and you can already adjust your business strategy to that direction. And then you are kind of early adapter to new developments. Then I will move to the oil and gas standardization. Mainly focus on one important technical committee within ISO, and ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. There's a dedicated technical committee with a very nice title, Materials, Equipment and Offshore Structures for the Petroleum, Petrochemical and Natural Gas Industries. Most time we say, well, this the oil and gas industry. And the main goals of this technical committee is, first of all, of course, prepare standards that are required by the industry. So we only respond to the needs and expectations of our stakeholders. And the intent is that those international standards are also, I already showed you the vision of international standards used locally worldwide. So the standards we develop are also intended to be adopted as national standards worldwide. Of course, going back to the relationship between legislation, standardization, and certification, we would also like that our standards are recognized by the regulator. So that indeed that builds trust about our activities. And also important is that all companies take part in the standardization process, so they can share their specifications to avoid that every company is putting a lot of additional specification on ISO documents, increasing costs because then the supplier has to adjust its processes to a particular company. So the intent is also to reduce that kind of company-specific requirements. And last but not least, we adhere to good project management that we deliver in time. As you can see, it's currently participation from all over the world. The blue indicates the countries who participate very actively by nominating experts in writing standards. And the orange colored countries are so-called observers. They monitor the development but not take part in the standardization activities as such. But if I focus on the Eastern Mediterranean area, then you see that countries are either not colored at all or orange, so are mostly observing, with the exception for Cyprus, was a very active country since a couple of years. So there's also an appeal to you on the call and who represent one of the orange or grey countries in this area. Consider participation because it has a lot of benefits, as explained. I will go not in very much detail about the structure. This picture is only meant to illustrate that there are different flags, so also the leadership positions are well spread around the world. We have a very good track record. The technical committee, TC67, was reactivated in the early 90s. And since then, we have published over 200 documents. And the number is still increasing, responding to the needs of the industry and all kinds of new developments. That's very well illustrated in this poster. It's every year prepared by IOGP. And IOGP is the international organization for the oil and gas producers. You see that our suite of standards cover the whole value chain of the oil and gas industry. So the exploration and production, transportation, refinery, and so on. And also covers new areas like LNG, that also might be becoming more important in the Eastern Mediterranean area. Convert indeed either on floating systems, natural gas in a liquid state to enable transportation without having pipelines. And one of the goals was the adoption of the ISO standards by every country. So that is well achieved. We publish occasionally a document that illustrates which country already has adopted the ISO standards to be the national standard. And a very strong vehicle is the European system, because in Europe we have a so-called mirror committee of TC67. And the only task the main task of the mirror committee is just to adopt the ISO standard as a European standard. Part of the adoption process is, of course, we have to ensure that the ISO standards are also fit for purpose for the European stakeholders. For example, it does not contain any conflicting requirements with EU legislation. And it supports the health and safety requirements to which we have to comply with in the European Union. But the strength of the system is once that mirror committee decides that an ISO standard can be adopted as European standard, then by default it will become the national standard in 34 countries that are currently member of CEN, and CEN is the European Organization for Standardization. So with a single process, an ISO standard will become a national standard in 34 countries. So, and maybe good to know is that the European Mineral Committee has a twinned secretariat with me representing the Netherlands, but also CYS for Cyprus, who is the twinning partner. So that way, yeah, Cyprus has also a very good position in the world of standardization, and it will be a very good focal point for you active in the Eastern Mediterranean area. And I understood from the list of participants that Pambas Kambas, the director of COS, COS is the Cyprus Standardization Organization, is online. So you can also contact him if you would like to be involved in your activities. Then again, a link to the legislation and standardization, but then from the oil and gas perspective, there's a focus also on Europe. So maybe not everyone on the call is part of Europe, but a similar approach also applies to the Middle East. For example, the Gulf states countries are also united, also in view of standardization through the GSO. Maybe also the North African countries have a similar system. And I use this case COS as an example, also national body, but this can be any national standards body who is active in the oil and gas sector. Oh. So in Cyprus, you have Technical Committee 22 that looks after the hydrocarbons standardization. It's a rather new committee established some years ago, also to respond to the increased activities with respect to the gas exploration and production. They are member of TC67, as well as member of TC12, is both participating in the international standardization and the European standardization, as explained. They, of course, have to follow the activities with respect to European legislation, for example, the offshore directive, safety directive, and of course, with national legislation laid down in the hydrocarbons regulations. And standards can be a supportive tool to demonstrate compliance with those kind of regulations. And what's nowadays also very important for the petroleum industry is that linked to the offshore safety directive, that was a response to Macondo. The European Commission will use standards as a tool to increase or enhance safety of the machinery used in the offshore drilling and well intervention. They are now preparing requests to CEN to develop European standards that ensure that minimum level of safety as laid down in the machinery directive. And we try to influence the European Commission to say, well, don't focus only on offshore, because most of the machinery are also used for onshore activities. But please be aware there will be a request from the European Commission somewhere by the end of this year or early next year that we have to develop standards that also impact your activities. That's also an additional reason to take part in standardization processes, because then you are aware of the latest developments, which you are also at a steer to influence the content of such a document. That was the license to operate, but at the end we would like to grow. I think someone else also used the term social license to operate. Of course, we are now shifting to a lower carbon emission economy. But if you look to all the scenarios, for example, those scenarios from the International Energy Agency, then we see that we still need oil and gas for the next decades, because the energy demand is still increasing. But oil and gas is, of course, also used as a feedstock for other purposes than energy, and for which it's very difficult to find a substitute. Also in the field of standardization, we respond to that kind of developments. In one way, of course, the climate is changing and we need to adapt, especially for the assets that have a long life, for example, the offshore structures. So we have to take into account more extreme weather conditions in our design and construction of that kind of structures. So we should ensure that the standards are fit for purpose for the long term as well. Of course, we would also try to lower our carbon footprint. Methane emissions are very important, and of course, the scope 1, 2, and 3 CO2 emissions in the sector. And also by reviewing our standards, we can either revise the standards to take into account the carbon intensity. But we also develop new standards in the field for methane emission assessment, benchmarking, to provide effective tools to monitor the developments and to use that as a kind of incentive to improve performance. Another aspect is rather new is it's called green manufacturing. Might have different terms, but it was introduced by the country who proposed to look at our standards to see in which way we can make the standards also more fit for purpose in view of, for example, the circular economy, in view of material efficiency, reducing waste. So we are now also looking how we can amend our current standards, or whether we need new standards that ensures that we also lower this kind of environmental impacts on the materials, products, equipment we use in the sector. I already explained in one of the goals that we would like to avoid many company-specific requirements. Still, there are a lot of company-specific requirements, but also to respond to the lower oil prices. ISP initiated a joint industry project. Number 33 was the next available number for the joint industry project within IHP to harmonize all the company specifications. So what we see now is that all major oil and gas operators collaboratively share their specifications, and then they find a common dominator. And that common dominator is first published as an IHP document. The ISP offers that document to ISO or another standards body like API for consideration in the next edition of their standards to take those requirements on board. And then the oil and gas companies don't need to have additional requirements anymore. So by this means of harmonization, you have also a very big improvement with respect to your cost effectiveness. And very important is that the digital transformation is going on in all kinds of areas, but also in the way we have to write our standards to make so-called machine-readable documents in which the data or the information in that kind of documents can be used in a more efficient way. Helping the industry indeed in applying the requirements. What's not listed in this bullet list are social license to operate, but it's also a very important message I would like to voice is that the oil and gas sector has a lot of know-how, a lot of experiences, a lot of expertise, given a long track record in the past. That can also be very helpful for other developments in the energy transition. If you look, for example, to the carbon capture and storage, then you have to deal with transportation of gas, in this case CO2, but also to store gas in the depleted gas fields. And the experience with well integrity is very useful for the CCS business as well. The same applies, for example, for offshore winds. They use structures. They already use the ISO standards. For the oil and gas, but the oil and gas standards are not really designed for offshore structures for wind, but there's a lot of know-how available for which the offshore wind sector can learn. And the same applies, for example, for the geothermal activities, because it's also drilling well and ensure that the well integrity is well managed during the whole life cycle, including abandonments. So I think that's it from me for the moment. Of course, you again an invitation to join us and to take part in our activities, because I think we have to work together to maintain our license to operate and to keep our to get our social license to operate or license to grow. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jano. Really appreciate your presentation. I think very thought-provoking in a number of ways. There is one outstanding question which has come to you from Mukesh Maheshwari, which is, first of all, I appreciate the point you made about the fact that this is a region that is not yet participating in the way for standards as it should. And there is a lot more activity going in the region. So there is a emerging discontinuity, if you will. And we'll come to that in a moment. The question is, what about API standard? Is the region not using API standards? That's the question.
I think the region will also use API standards. In the past, many standards were co-branded standards API and ISO due to some sanction issues. That is currently not possible anymore. So there is good cooperation and coordination between ISO 10067 and API to ensure that we are not duplicating work. So we also make agreements with the leading standards body to maintain a standard. So sometimes API will be leading in particular product equipment. And in other cases, ISO will be leading, so that there will be a single standard for each topic. So people can also use API standards, yes.
Okay. The question that I have is the point you made about the growth of LNG in the region and the LNG standards organization. And so what would be helpful from my perspective to know a little bit more is, what is the nature of cooperation with the LNG standards organizations like the GII, GNL, or the SIGTO? Because there's a shipping element there as well. And are there any standards developing for LNG that that the NEN is kind of publishing?
Yes, within TC67 we have a dedicated subcommittee who is dealing with all the LNG installations and equipment standards. Like COES and NEN and every national standards body, we nominate experts in the ISO process because we develop an ISO document and we adopt that ISO document as a national document. So we don't develop our own national standard. And that specific subcommittee has already developed several standards in the area of LNG installation equipment. Earlier this year, the first standard for floating LNG has been published. Yeah, and the number of standards is increasing. We also work together with other technical committees dealing with LNG. For example, there's a committee on shipping and marine technology who has developed an ISO standard for LNG bunkering. There are other committees dealing with dynamic flow measurements of LNG. Then other committees dealing with the quality of LNG. So yes, we have a lot of cooperation with other stakeholders and committees to ensure that we don't duplicate work, we don't conflicting requirements, and ensure that the work is done efficiently. Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that particular answer and the presentation. Really, standards is actually a very important topic, because unless you have those in place and unless you actually do not move forward in your projects or your social license to operate or license to grow. I do not have any specific more questions that are coming directly towards you precisely. So what I would now like to do, with everybody's permission, is to go to the general Q&A session. What we've tried to do is to try and answer most of the questions that came up as they came. So I would now like to open the floor for any further questions. If anyone has, they can be typed up or they can send them, you can send them to me. I know I also have a couple of questions for Andrea on his presentation, because I had to unfortunately, encourage him to kind of, bring it to a quick close, because we wanted to kind of do this in time. So are there any questions, general questions? Oh, there's one that has come up. The question is, there is a lot of questioning going on about the economic profitability of gas deposits around Cyprus, and how viable investments could be considering the cost of infrastructure and the evolution of environmental policies. What are your opinions on that subject? Would someone like to take that up? Would perhaps Luciano, would you like to take that up?
Sorry. For sure, this profitability, economic profitability, could be found in that area. So we have discussed about the possibility to create an hub in the Eastern Mediterranean. I think that this could be a good chance for the industry. At the moment, we are at the exploration phase, so we cannot estimate the future investment. But as I said in my presentation, we have some opportunities to have links with other areas where we operate. But for sure, some good solution would be from this wider scenario that we can consider.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, would you like to share your perspective, especially around profitability of gas deposits, the cost of compliance relating to environment? Perhaps also Jarno would like you to come in from a standards perspective on this, that with, as you've mentioned in your presentation, that methane emissions and emission requirements and standards will also have a bearing on that they have to be incorporated. So if you could kind of look at this particular question from your individual areas of specialization, that would be great.
Well, if I may.
Yes, please, Andrea.
I want to answer in a really simple way. The question is about the economic profitability of the gas deposits around Cyprus. Well, considering the cost of infrastructure and the evolution of environmental policies, well, as a matter of fact, in a risk management perspective, the tightening environmental policy could really affect the cost, both capex and operating cost of the assets there. So this could easily addressed, and this is a way, this is an example on how much could be useful to consider this uncertainty, also related to not only global uncertainties like oil price or demand, but also local policies that could really get higher costs for the company. So in my perspective, I think that the approach is to analyze, if I have to do an investment now, is to analyze also considering this kind of new legislation or policies that are going to be in the business in the next future.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Jarno to add indeed. I think standards can also improve the business case. In one way, as explained, it will reduce the costs if you have standardized specifications. So when purchasing your products and services, that will reduce the costs. So that will have an economic benefit. With standards, we also offer a lot of standards as tools to manage your risk and opportunities. So when applying those kind of standards, then you have also a better understanding where your risks and opportunities are, and you can act on that. And I think it was perfectly demonstrated, I think also in the presentation from ENI, how they apply this kind of standards in their risk management.
Great. Thank you very much. There's two more questions. There's one on standardization, Jarno, which maybe you can help. What is the procedure for being a member of the standardization procedure? I do not see that Greece, I do not see participates in the figure of the countries or so. Can you tell us, if it's a detailed answer, maybe you can take it offline, but if you can give a good indication in the interest of time, that would be really helpful for our participants from Greece.
Well, a general answer is that everyone who has interest to participate in standardization should always contact the national standards body. Mm-hmm. And the ISO website contains the contact details from the national standards body if you don't know who to contact. And for example, you can contact Pambos Kamas if you are located in Cyprus. And me, if you are located in the Netherlands, but I don't think we have much Dutch people on the call today. And I can answer more specific the question offline to the Greek person.
Right. Thank you very much. One final question, which is, what are the major E&P projects in Cyprus you foresee in 2021? Anyone? Andrea?
I will leave this to the ENI colleague. Maybe okay. He's better knowledge about that.
I know that Zohar is going forward. Luciano, would you kind of, like to speculate what we could expect in the region in 2021? Hello? I don't know whether we've lost Luciano. I have one question for you, Andrea, which you kind of spoke very detailed about the risk management.
Yes.
And the question is, all of these activities are done at a asset evaluation phase or asset preparation phase. Mm-hmm. how are they continued through the asset development process? Who does it? What part of the organizations in oil and gas companies do it? And the second is that, you mentioned all the statistical correlation with regard to the Monte Carlo simulation. And if you can give us some commentary on how successful is the application of Monte Carlo simulation been in practical situations? I mean, people understand it very well as a very good theoretical risk management tool. But how widely deployed is it practically? How many companies use it, for example?
Okay, well, for the first question, this is an approach obviously for mostly for financial forecast. So when you have to make the final investment decision in the oil and gas, you have to consider all the aspect of the asset valuation, and then also the uncertainties. But then, even after that, you continue evaluating in a rolling basis. So it could be monthly or quarterly basis. The NPV, the remaining NPV of the assets, and so of the overall portfolio, in order to also make the decision like cut off, okay, of the production and decision like that. So the evaluation of the NPV is not only before the investment decision, but continue through the time in order to analyze continuously the value of the portfolio, and then to make the decision of, for example, revamping or cut off of the production and so on and so forth. So this is really an operating process. Okay. For the second question, well, we have made, for example, an analysis many years ago that in a quantitative perspective of the risk management added value. For example, if we use a quantitative risk analysis approach, and so we are more accurate on the estimates, okay, because this is the point. For example, if we are more accurate on the CapEx estimate, we can save up more than 3% of the CapEx total in terms of finance savings, because you do not overestimate the budget and underestimate the budget, and so you do not block money and lose, okay, their value. Okay, so.
Okay.
Did I answer you?
Yes, indeed. Thank you. So I know we've run a little late, but I hope that everyone found the discussions very useful. I certainly found them, and we had a very wide variety within the whole social license to operate, or the license to grow. And this is going to be a continuing theme, I think, that I think EMC would like to continue, because there is a lot of discussion and demand for more operating experience sharing type of discussions on the subject of the East Mediterranean oil and gas. So I think there will be a few announcements towards the end, but it remains for me to thank all the speakers for their time and their patience. Thank you for answering all the questions. And thank you for the audience who also have been very patient. So with that, I guess I should hand over to our organizers, who might have a couple of announcements to make. Perhaps Nick and or Samuela might want to come in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.